Guys, thanks so much for joining us today. So, first of all, let me introduce myself. I'm Nicholas Ruston, the founder of Robot Mascot. Robot Mascot is an investment readiness agency, and we specialize in creating investment materials that convince investors. And we work exclusively with founders seeking pre-seed, seed, and Series A funding. We've supported over 3,000 founders to date. Our clients are 40 times more likely to raise investment. And so far, they've raised over 220 million. Now, before I invite our special guest to take the stage today, I just want to point you in the direction of our free 90-minute fundraising strategy session. So if you're currently raising investment, or you're planning on raising, or you're just trying to figure out whether or not raising investment is for you, we're going to give you a free session that'll unpack the winning strategy that leads to huge success for our clients. So we've got some free places for this, but they're limited. So do get in quick. I'll be sharing a link to book your place in the chat in a second. So before I introduce Anthony, I just want to say that at Robot Mascot, we're really fortunate because we get to work with so many inspiring founders that are taking leaps into the unknown, and they're doing new things and they're always doing exciting new stuff. However, taking those leaps, it can be pretty daunting. And it can be pretty lonely too. So that's why we like to bring these sessions to you and support you on your journey, and also give you access to great people like Anthony that can help you along the way. So I was really pleased when Anthony agreed to join us on this session. He's got tons of experience to share. Where do I begin? I mean, not only is Anthony the founder and the CEO of Seedlegals, a legal tech platform that helps startup founders for a fraction of the cost of using a law firm, but Anthony's career has also spanned 3D graphics, P2P music, internet video, social TV, and he's headed up the BBC iPlayer. And back in 2009, Wired magazine's cover story billed him as the man who saved the BBC. So I know you'll get tons out of today's session, and please feel free to be really vocal and ask Anthony lots of questions at the end of his presentation. And now I'd like to introduce you to Anthony Rose, the founder of Seedlegals.
Thank you so much, Nicholas. Now, just before I'm going to remove you from the spotlight and I'm going to remove myself from the spotlight. So, I love to talk about things that are going to be of interest to you. So, give a quick thumbs up if you have not raised investment yet. Okay. Hey, and the Mojiko, give a thumbs up if you have already raised investment. Okay, couple of people. All right, so I'll start at the beginning, and I'm going to turn on screen share and share some time, and then stop screen share and wave my arms. And but we're going to cover everything related to that startup journey. And if you've got questions, post them in the chat. I'll look at the chat periodically, and then at the end, if you've got a bit of time, we can bring on air and actually try to talk to particular questions that you've got. So let us begin. So we're going to cover the startup journey. So my background, as you heard, once upon a time, I used to head up BBC iPlayer. Then I left the BBC, got back to my startup roots, built a startup, sold it, built another startup, sold it, got tired of paying lawyers, met my co-founder, Laurent, genius ex-VC and serial angel investor, built Seedlegals. So we're a 160-person company, about 50,000 UK startups on the platform. And that means I talk to thousands of founders and I see for myself what works, what keeps people up at night. I'm here to help share thoughts to help you get there faster. Because from what I've seen, I mean, every startup idea is different, but the startup journey is actually very self-similar. So it all starts with an idea. And sorry about the occasional coughing. Um, what happens is this
It's agile,
session.
certified.
Right, I'm going to divide the session into two parts. The first one is product, and then the next part is fundraising. So one of the problems is when you have an idea, you think everyone's going to you're going to want your idea. And but the hard part, you wake up in a cold sweat a year later, realizing that actually the building of it was easy, particularly with AI tools now, but getting people to want it is the difficult part. And so I'm going to take you through what I've realized in retrospect is the thing that you really should be spending all of your time on. So it starts off with you going for a run, you're in the shower, wherever it is that you have ideas. And you have this idea, and let me take as an example a GPS enabled bicycle lock with blockchain that is going to find your bike immutably when it's lost in London. So you think this is an awesome idea, and you think that you're just going to go and build it. But the reality is, everyone is building things. How do you know that people really want it? So I'm sure many on the call have seen and read the mom test. But if you haven't, go get the mom test. Now it's like £14 on Amazon, and it's called the mom test because you know that, of course, you need to validate your product idea. So you need to ask people. So you go around to people and go, I'm working on this amazing new bicycle lock. Isn't it going to be amazing? And of course, people don't want to offend you. They think, well, I should say nice things. Also, the way you've asked it, it's impossible to say no because no one knows what it is. So they're idealizing this fantastic device. And the reason it's called the mom test is because you ask your mother, and your mother goes, I have no idea what you're talking about, but my son's such a clever boy. Of course, it's a good idea. And instead, you need to be asking real users, potential users of your products. You need to be asking them actual questions like, have you ever looked for one of these? How much would you pay for it? Do you own anything like this? And if they have not searched for it and they have not looked for other competing ones, you could be creating a new category defining new products, or it may be just a vanity project. And the problem is if you're creating a new category product, like, mobile phones never existed, you've got way more work to do because you're not solving a problem for a user. You have to help them think that they've got a problem and then you're going to solve it, which is much harder than just solving a problem. So the most successful, fastest to market products and the most investable ones are the ones where you've identified something is done a lot. It's done in an old way. Technology can change that. Maybe with AI, you've identified a pain point for millions of people or hundreds of thousands of people, and you are creating a solution for that. And then as soon as people find your solution, they're going to want it. So the mom test is a great exercise to go through. So the next thing is something I learned a few startups ago, which is, are you the audience? So having now come up with this idea, you're now going to start building a team at some point and creating it. But you need to know what your customers really want from it. So at Seedlegals, I'm a repeat entrepreneur. I've built and sold some businesses, paid lots of money to lawyers, spoken to many investors. So if I build a product that's useful for me, hopefully it's useful to other people like me. And if you're a founder making something for yourself, you're an accountant and you've seen too many companies, doing problems with annual tax returns and you've created a solution for that, that's perfect. But it's not always the case. And it's often not the case for your developer team. So let's say you're making a new app for elderly people, for mobility care for elderly people. Your developer team are all in their 20s. And there they are, happily thinking that the target audience is going to be on an iPhone with cool fonts and sexy graphics and pop-up menus, but they have no idea what your 80-year-old target audience is going to be using. So if you are not the target audience yourself, life is much, much harder. You have to find maybe a co-founder who is, or find marketing or technical people who are. So in most cases, you may be the target audience yourself because you probably came up with this idea. But if you're not, I think you want to think very carefully about it. And I realized that a couple of startups ago where my audience began skewing younger and younger. And one day I woke up and went, I just don't know what my audience wants. I'm not them. And then it was time to sell the company to somebody who would love that audience and grow it. So that is an important learning. So the next thing, which goes back to where I started, which is that you think at the beginning, all your effort, the hard bit is building it. And then you wake up in a cold sweat later going, actually, I've built all the stuff. I've got people to leave their day jobs, follow me. I've got money from investors. I've given up my day job and, earning good money elsewhere to build this. And it's launched and nobody wants it. And maybe I built something that no one really wants. I don't even know the path to getting people to want it. And I think any serial founder has been through that pain point, and you think, if only I had really validated it beforehand. So, in order to validate it, if only you hadn't spent a year building it in order to find out if people really want it or not, how would you do that? And I'm going to turn off screen share for a minute and do arm waving around that. So, of course, once upon a time, you kind of really had to build it to get it in front of people. But then along came tools like Marvel and Figma and Canva that let you make prototypes. And in Figma or other tools, you can really easily create a prototype to show people. And that's super important. So if you've got a mobile app, make a mock-up of a mobile app. It's going to take you days or maybe some weeks. And as part of making that prototype, it's going to force you to think through the app functionality and then put that in front of users and say, ideally a target audience rather than some random person who's not going to use it. So you're going to find somebody whose bike has been nicked in my scenario, and you're going to show them this app. And you're going to say, tell me what this app does. And you're going to watch them as they look at the screen, and you're going to see that they just don't understand the buttons you've made. And then you're going to go back right after that meeting and change the buttons. And you're going to keep repeating that until they go, yes, this is exactly what I want. I can see this. Get them to tell you what it does, and then iterate until it's clear. And if you can't get people to say, this is what I need, then maybe it's a good indicator that you shouldn't put more work into it until they can. But you can now go a step further. Lovable is my second favorite website in the world, after my own, of course. And Lovable is awesome because not only does it vibe code a website or app for you, you probably, by the way, don't even think about using that for production, but for prototyping, it's amazing. And my favorite party trick is when a customer comes to me, as people often do, I'm not encouraging it, say, Anthony, please review my pitch deck. And I'll create a 5-minute, 10-minute Loom video and go through the pitch deck. But then what I'll do is, if they've got a public website, I'll go to Lovable and say, make a better version of URL, do a competitor analysis to see what competitors are doing. And that's the genius of Lovable. Unlike Figma and so on, where you have to do everything, in the case of Lovable, it's doing the work. So tell it, do a competitor analysis, find key features that competitors are doing, create a pricing page, make a vibrant modern site, show customer testimonials. It's going to make them all up, of course, because your app's not live yet, but that's okay. And show the key problems that our customers are facing and how, insert name of your product, show fixes, include nice lifestyle graphics of our target audience. And you very likely will be completely amazed at what Lovable comes up with. This doesn't mean you need to, of course, immediately adopt it. You can then choose to get inspired by it. Of course, it's all going to be made up numbers because your site and app isn't live yet. But I guarantee it's going to transform your thinking. And as I said, my favorite party trick is when I take somebody's website and build a better version, literally in the time it takes the coffee machine to warm up. And I encourage you to do it with your own site. And what Lovable does so cleverly is by doing a competitor analysis, it hones in on the things that you may take for granted. Because the key problem, and really this is where Robot Mascot comes in to help with, is from looking at thousands of pitch decks and websites, and indeed my own website at the beginning. The problem is you're so proud of what you're doing that your website and pitch deck says what you do and essentially how clever you are rather than the problem you're solving for your audience. And you have to completely transform that. And as an example, when we started Seedlegals, the first version of our website said essentially, we do document automation and contract generation. And then I woke up in the morning one day and went, there are 0 people in the world who get up looking for document automation and generation. There are thousands of founders who wake up in the morning going, I need money, or I need to give stock options to my team, or I need to do an NDA. Can I transform my site into saying the fastest way to close your next round? And here's how to incentivize your team. So whenever I look at a website or a pitch, if it's of the form, something is broken, here's how we fix it, and then you proceed, that is a good start. Whereas if it says we use blockchain and AI to solve the insurance industry problems, very nice for you, but nobody is going to go, that is exactly what I need. So after this call, do have some fun with Lovable. I mean, I think it's $20 a month. I think it's money well spent to create that prototype. All right, so now on to the next point. So the art of the pitch. And I've covered that a moment ago, which is, of course, in order to get money from investors and in order to get team members to leave their day jobs and follow you, and in order to get customers to want to use your product, you need to sell them on your vision and dream. And here I see many pitch decks. And again, as I said, like websites, they say what you do rather than how you solve a problem. So I'm going to spend a couple of minutes talking about pitching because I see lots and lots of pitches. They're not great. So the 101 in 4 minutes on pitching. So pitches are going to fall into a few categories. Maybe the 1 minute pitch, the stand-up. You've got a minute somewhere. Then maybe the 3 to 5 minute stand-up pitch. Then you've got your 30 minutes, Zoom call or in-person meeting with an investor. So let's go through these to see how you can have the winning pitch. So in all cases, a pitch is like a story. You're selling a story about how people are going to love and want what you do. If it's on your website, it's so a consumer will go, I'm going to want it. If it's to an investor, it's so I'm going to be in. And so the story goes something like this to me. Something is broken. It's insane. We're here to fix it. This is what our product looks like as a solution. It's a huge market. These are our competitors, by the way. This is how we plan to make money. This is the traction so far. Here's the team. This is how much we're raising. Contact me, to find out more. And so the story is about how something's not right. The timing is perfect, and you're changing that. And every time someone does a pitch, I'm thinking in my mind, how can we transform it into that flow? So the other thing, if you're doing a stand-up pitch that's a minute or 3 or 5 minutes, the audience is getting stressed if they think that you're going to overflow the time, overrun. So if you start off talking, my brother and I met and we were thinking, it's like, dude, you're already, the graph is showing you're going to be over the minutes. It's going to be stressful. So you want to get people excited, get them into the desire that they want in, show that you're solving a problem for them as well. So although, of course, your gluten-free coffee or whatever it might be, you're not selling to an investor. Investors are consumers as well. They're high net worth consumers. And very often, by getting them to see themselves as a customer of your product, if they won over, they're going to think millions of other people are going to won over. Your product's going to be huge and they want in. So it's all about storytelling. And when comes to a 1 minute or a 3 minute pitch, if there's slides behind, you need to memorize your slides. So, there's, US Marines where they blindfolded and have to assemble the gun when they can't see anything. You need to have remembered your pitch deck slides exactly like that. So never ever look at the slide deck and in the background. If you're doing a stand-up pitch, you need to be looking at the audience. Don't have notes. Remember what you're talking about. And of course, we all have memory lapses. So the trick I learned is you keep just three things in mind. And if everything goes pear-shaped, the video doesn't work, the screen doesn't work, you've forgotten it, you just go back to these three anchor points. Okay, so fundraising is broken, people spend far too much on lawyers, Seedlegals has automated that, call me when you're doing your next round, something like that in the case of Seedlegals. And then if I forget anything else, I know what to go back to. And so that, by the way, I think the real test of a founder is when you get on stage and the presentation doesn't work. They can't find the right HDMI thing. It doesn't work. And now, if you act like there's no problem at all and just wing it, you've won over the audience. Okay, so now we're going to switch. Before we get to fundraising, we're going to switch to one other thing, which is the art of finding investors. So you figured out your pitch. You've got a pitch deck with a great story to it. And by the way, everything in pitching, whether it's a pitch deck or finding investors, I like to think of like a Netflix drama series. When Netflix makes episode one, the goal of episode one is to get you to watch episode two. There's a cliffhanger at the end. And the goal of episode two is to get you to watch episode three. So you're going to start, of course, once you've got a pitch, you now need to reach investors. And the story of your life is you don't know any angel investors. So you start doing some Google searches, you go on the Seedlegals site, there are lists of the top 25 London early stage funds, whatever it might be, and you start messaging or going to their websites. But the sad reality is until you've got revenue, VCs almost always say, love what you're doing, come back later. And so you start either just not even getting through their onboarding pitch stage, or they never get back to you, or they reply saying, love what you're doing, come back later. And it's very, very disheartening. And then you realize going to VCs before you've got revenue, with rare exception, is a bit of a waste of time. You need to find angel investors. So how are you going to find angel investors? Well, kind of everyone is an angel investor. But where are they? Obviously you've got friends and family. Don't take money from family unless they can afford to lose their money. Even with SEIS, don't promise them a guaranteed return. SEIS means that even if your business does go out of business, you'll still get invited to the next Christmas party. But nonetheless, you want to only take money in general from people who, if your business doesn't work out, it hasn't killed the relationship. But realistically, you've only got a small number of friends and family if you want to talk to them at all. So now you have to reach other investors. And I think the way to do that is to make as much noise as possible on the internet. If you're writing articles, publishing content, doing LinkedIn posts, being helpful, you want to be everywhere. When an investor Googles you and they just see your website, it's a bit meh. But if they start seeing all those LinkedIn posts, which Google indexes brilliantly, that's great. If they see you in other publications, they see you a thought leader, you write interesting articles on the problem space, how you're taking a different approach, simply, leadership thoughts. I write hundreds of articles literally on, SEIS and EIS conditions, Delaware flips and all sorts of things. So they appear everywhere. So you want to be bigger than you are. The next thing is you now need to start reaching out, of course, to investors. And there, the LinkedIn outreach approach is a good way to go. You need to get a bit out of your comfort zone and you need to start messaging people. But if you message random people, they have to accept your connection request, and there's the big ignore button sitting right there. So you want to try and come up with some relevant messaging. So a top trick you can use is find competitors or other people in a similar space. Go on Companies House, look up their company, look at the last confirmation statement, and you'll see all the investors listed in the confirmation statement. And then you can, look them up on LinkedIn, for example, if they look relevant, or the biggest investors and so on. And maybe you can drop them a message saying, hey, I can see that you're interested in bike tech. I'm working on a new thing. Or you might say, I see you invested in such and such. I'm working on a new thing that solves this problem. Don't make it, any hyperbole. And don't send a pitch deck at that stage. A pitch deck sending is episode 3. Episode 1 is to get them to accept your connection request. So something that looks sufficiently targeted. So when I get, LinkedIn incoming connection request that says, does your company get R&D tax credits? It's like, I've hit delete before the end of the sentence. But if it says, hey, Anthony, I saw one of your videos on fundraising. It looked super interesting. And now you've got my attention. And even if the next sentence says, I'm working on something in insurance tech, I'll go, okay, I'll accept the request. So now they've got through episode 1. And then episode 2, you want to get the investor to give you permission to get on a call or send the pitch deck. And so, can I tell you more? And if the investor says, sounds interesting, awesome. So now you can suggest a call. You could potentially send a pitch deck. I'm not a big fan of sending a pitch deck to an investor ahead of a phone call or a Zoom call. And the reason is, if you send a pitch deck to an investor and they don't respond, does that mean they've never looked at the pitch deck? Or does it mean they've looked at the pitch deck and it's not for them? It puts you in an awkward position. You can't write to them somewhat aggressively and going, did you actually open the pitch deck and have a look? And even if you can track it, it doesn't help going, it looks like you looked at the pitch deck and you said no. So my preference is to try and get on a call with them and go through the pitch deck together. You could make a much shorter product deck, a teaser, because the investor might say, please send me the deck ahead of the call. And you might say, well, I prefer to do a product demo and a pitch deck on the call. You're going to have to see what works best for you. But sending everything up front, I think, leaves you in the slightly awkward position. The other thing is on the call, if you do get on a call and you've sent a pitch deck to the investor beforehand, can you assume they've read the pitch deck? If you ask them, if you looked at the pitch deck, they'll go, yeah. And they haven't. I mean, mostly they haven't, or they skimmed it. And then you're stuck with, should you go through it again or assume that, So now, just before we get on to actual fundraising, one more point, which is, when you're on an investor call, you've got 30 minutes to pitch the investor. A key mistake founders make is they spend all 30 minutes talking at the investor instead of getting the investor to talk a bit first, and then spend 10 minutes going through your pitch quickly, and then leaving the last 10 minutes open for questions with the investor. And why? So firstly, you don't know up front what this investor is looking for. Of course, you can see, and you should do your homework on their website to see if they're a VC, which things they invest in. Maybe you're talking to an angel investor. Will they be a lead investor or a follow investor? So this is something you only realize once you start talking to investors, which is investors, they'd always, their websites have this, hype of we pick the future leaders, we invest in the future, the bold, the brave. And then it turns out they're follower investors. And what that means is you're raising £300,000. They might invest £50,000. You can add a 0 to both numbers if you want. And then they say, that's great. When you've got a lead investor, call us and we're in. And a lead investor will usually agree the valuation, maybe do due diligence, pick the deal terms, and others will join on that basis. If you're raising from angel investors, there's usually no lead investor. You are running the show, and hopefully on Seedlegals, generate the term sheet or use Seed Fast, which we'll get to in a minute, and you're driving. But if you've got a VC, They may send you the term sheet. You'll still do the round on Seedlegals, but the lead is going to tell you what they want as the valuation, not you tell them. So when you're talking to an investor, a VC, try to ask. I mean, if you ask the investment hypothesis and sectors, don't ask something that's already on their website, but ask what ticket sizes they do. Are they a lead investor or a follow investor? And if they say they're a follow investor, you're never going to get them to commit on the call unless you've already got a lead. So you want to keep them warm. But if they say they're a lead investor, awesome. Your goal is now to try and get to close on them so that you can now go back to all the follow investors and get them on board. So get them to talk a bit. They love talking. And then you're going to pitch, and you know now exactly which things to focus on. Because if they tell you they focused very much on traction, hyper growth, you're going to start focusing on that. If it turns out that sustainability and impact are important for them, or they love a particular sector, or they've said that marketplaces never work, or they've stopped investing in the sector, you're going to, of course, you can't change your pitch deck, but you can change your pitch in your mind to focus on the little clues or big clues they've given you. And then you're going to leave questions at the end. And your investor pitch slot to them will be refreshingly different to all the others they do, which increases your chances. So let me now go back, and we are now get on to I'm going to skip the IP, I'm going to skip that, and we're going to talk about fundraising. And in particular, we're going to talk about agile fundraising. So you found some investors. You've created a great pitch. You figured out how much you want to raise. And by the way, nobody knows how much they really want to raise. I mean, it's a range. If you get £1 million, you're going to hire lots of people. If you get £100,000, you're going to hire almost nobody. You're going to adapt to the amount you can raise, but don't give the investor a range, because investors want certainty. If you say I'm raising between 200 and 400, the investor's going to be thinking, dude, figure out what you want, get back to me. So even if you don't know how much you're going to raise, pick a number, and then you can use agile fundraising to get there bit by bit. So let me explain. So I think it always starts like this, which is, take out a spreadsheet to work out how much you need to raise. And you go, well, I need two, software developers. I need a salesperson, a marketing person, a data person, a designer, two founders. It's 8 people. I think the number's always 8. And I'm going to pay them, all up, it's going to be 50K a year. So it's 400K a year I know I need to raise for 18 months. So 600K. So I need to raise 600K. Now, the Seedlegals data shows the median dilution in a funding round. In other words, how much you're going to dilute is 15%. So diluting 15% means your valuation is 5 times the amount that you're raising. So the investors end up owning 1 in 6, 16%, near enough 15. So you go, great, I'm raising 600K at a 3 million pre-money valuation. And now you go and talk to investors, and they go, 3 million valuation. You say, what have you built? And you go, oh, nothing. It's just this here lovable prototype. And they go, love what you're doing, come back later when you've built something. Because in the UK market, 3 million equates to a valuation, equates to you having built something already and already having some users. And so you can either reduce the valuation and give away way much more equity, which is probably a bad idea, or you can raise less. So you go, all right, forget that. I'm raising 300K at a 1.5 million valuation. And now you're going to be in the ballpark for, the first round, for what investors are looking for astute investors. Of course, not all investors are astute investors. Friends and family may have no idea what the valuation is. But what I've seen from UK startups is they fall into a few groups, raising 50K from friends and family, raising 250K SEIs from angel investors to build the product, raising 500 to 800K in a seed round from a mixture of early stage funds and angel investors once you've got your product launched to grow it. and then doing a Series A round, raising several million pounds from VCs, so that you will have lots of money that you can spend all with Google and Facebook buying more ads because you've proved you can build a product, you have revenue, and now you're spending money on pay-per-click and other ads to acquire more users and grow faster. So once you see this formula, the other thing to think about is if you think over the life of your company, you're going to raise 3 rounds of funding, and after the third round, you're either profitable and don't need to raise again, or you're good to sell the company and everyone makes a good return on their investment and you and your time. So if you dilute 15% and you do that 3 times, at the end of the third round, you'll have 55%, or the founders will have 55% equity, which is more than 50%. So you are the majority shareholders in your business, which is good. But if you dilute by 25 or 20% each time, after 3 rounds, you'll have less than 50% equity, which means the investors are really controlling your business, which is a less good position to be in than you controlling your business. So the idealized formula to me, it doesn't mean anyone actually sticks to it, but that might be, if you're thinking about your game of chess, 3 funding rounds, 15% dilution. Okay, great. So now you've figured out you're going to raise, let's say for your first round, 300K at a 1.5 or 2 million valuation, hypothetically. So you've now got 2 ways to go on your funding round. Way number one, which is I call the bus trip. So the bus trip is a funding round. You talk to investors, they go, hey, yeah, I'm in, that's awesome. I can invest 20K. And you tell them, amazing, come back in October when I've got all the other passengers on the bus for my funding round. So a funding round, like a bus trip, is you have to wait. The bus can only go when all the investors are on, the passengers are on board. You have to rustle up them to get them on board. You have to hold up the bus while the stragglers arrive. But the reality is you didn't need £300,000 today. If you had 50,000 or 100,000 today, you can start paying yourself a salary. You can start hiring people. So what if there was an alternative to the bus trip, the funding round, where when an investor says, yes, I'm in for 20K, instead of saying, come back in October, you can say, great, let me send you a seed fast to get your money today. So seed fasts, unlike a funding round, I think a seed fast is like an Uber. It's as you find one, send them on their way. And seed fast is like an IOU. It says, I'm going to give you money and you're going to give me shares when you do your next funding round at a valuation to be determined in the round. But because I'm coming in early to incentivize me, you're going to give me a discount of 10 or 20%. And by the way, for SEIS purposes, because all early stage investment in the UK, 80% is SEIS or EIS. If I don't do a funding round within 6 months, I'm going to give you shares instead at what's called the long stop valuation. And so you're going to say, if I don't do a funding round in 6 months, I'll give you shares at a £2 million valuation. And so now your goal has changed from every time I meet an investor, I'm going to put them in my little spreadsheet to come back some months later to every time I find an investor, I'm going to try to get money from them today with the seed fast. And I call this agile fundraising. And agile fundraising has transformed the way UK startups raise. And funding rounds, or at least in early stages, are almost the dinosaur now. 70% of investment on Seedlegals is not on a funding round. It's raising before a funding round with seed fast or topping up a funding round with what we call instant investment, where you get money from investors and you essentially join them to the last round and you can increase the valuation as you go along. So now that you know that, everything is transformed from, I'm going to start reaching out to investors, LinkedIn or whatever else. I'm going to have a great story to tell them, and I'm going to try to get them to go, yes, I'm in, and now can I send you a seed fast? And I've seen some founders being tremendously successful. I mean, my favorite is Sophia from Sourdough, Sophia Bakery. It's a bakery in Hackney. And I noticed on Seedlegals that she was buying quite a few seed fasts, like 100 of them, and she's raised a substantial amount of money from hundreds of people individually. I'm convinced that everyone who walks into her bakery, she says, would you like a baguette? Would you like a sourdough? And would you like a seed fast? And I think that one of the things I love about Seedlegals is Sophia is not a fintech guru from level 39 Canary Wharf. She's a baker, but by democratizing and giving tools, she's now able to raise in a way that she would never have before. Because having gone to, otherwise she'd have to go to VCs and they go, bakery, what's your growth model and where's AI and so on. But now she's able to reach her target investors efficiently and have a tool to do that, which I'm totally delighted. So now Agile fundraising, something to think about. And now I'm going to turn to the questions. And by the way, if anyone would like to raise their hand, I'm would love that you pop on air and ask any questions. And otherwise, I will go to. Okay, so there's a question from Henry saying, is there a reason you don't offer flexibility for the first 6 months of a 3 to 5 year contract to reduce the amount pre-revenue? Okay, I didn't quite understand the question. Henry, if you want to pop on air, I'm delighted you asked the question.
Hi, Anthony.
Hi.
Yes, so I've been talking to some of your colleagues actually because I was keen to work with you, and I was struck by obviously I'm pre-revenue at the moment, and the way in which it was financed worked out. It was going to cost over £1,000 a month to join up, and I can definitely see the value in it. I'm just wondering why you don't offer sort of flexibility in the first 6 months to then increase the price point post that, or is it just like a strict sort of
Okay,
fee?
right. So, I mean, at Seedlegals, unlike a law firm where we don't charge hundreds of pounds an hour, it's a fixed fee with unlimited help and support. But I mean, in general, it's £1,000 a year for cap table, all the agreements you need, and so on. How much are you looking to raise?
I'm looking to raise about 400,000.
Okay, so I mean, on Seedlegals, that would be £4,000. If you're raising with Seed Fast, you can either buy Flex, which gives you a better pricing, or you could just buy Seed Fast as you need. So, I mean, my goal is to make it as inexpensive for you as possible. So, what you would probably do is you'd probably say your Seedlegals Plus, which gives you advance assurance and a year on Seedlegals. And then every time you need a Seed Fast, let's say you find your first investor who's investing 20K, that'll cost £200 for a seed fast. So you definitely shouldn't need to spend large amounts, but drop me a note,
Brilliant.
Anthony@seedlegals.com, or hit me up on LinkedIn with what you're looking to do, and I'll figure out the least cost way to do it. But it doesn't sound like it should be very expensive.
Perfect. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Pleasure. All right. So now a question from Alberto saying, how crucial is face-to-face interaction with potential investors versus doing everything virtually? A great question. Once upon a time before COVID, the face-to-face meeting was the only way to do things. So it made it impossible to raise from US investors because unless you're getting on a plane. But that's largely changed. And I can't say for sure, but I suspect a lot of investment these days is done over Zoom. Um, I, I mean, if you can meet in person, that's great. I guess the only way to answer that question is to say your mileage will vary by investor. Clearly, traveling to meetings is less efficient than jumping on a Zoom call, but maybe your first point of outreach is going to be online, and if it looks like the investor isn't too far away, and it looks like meeting in person is going to be beneficial, then absolutely go for it. And if you meet in person, ironically, the screen share doesn't work as well, right? So when you're on a Zoom call, you go full screen, you're getting a great presentation, but there you are sitting in a cafe, it's noisy, there's the glare, you've got your small laptop, you're trying to work it from the side. I found that the product demos and pictures work less well in person than on a Zoom call. On the other hand, there's nothing like the personal interaction and buying the other person a croissant, to establish that rapport. And of course, it's your perfect investor KYC as well to see that they really are real. All right. Question from Matt. What happens if you do seed fast but fail to raise later? From the investor viewpoint, is this very risky? So that is a great point. So I did speak about lead investors and follow investors. So a lead investor is somebody, usually the biggest investor in the round, and they will usually set the deal terms. But in early stage rounds, you don't want there to be a lead. You want to be leading. In later stage rounds, there's generally going to be a lead. But the biggest fear of an investor, of course, is you raise money and then go out of business because no one wants it. The second biggest fear is that you tell them that you're raising 500K, they're in for 20K, you only managed to raise 100K, and you've told them in your presentation you need 500K to get to launch and beyond and so on. So they're the only idiot that's come in, and you haven't found the rest. And so, an investor sensibly is going to want to say, I'm in, but only when all the other investors are in as well. And you have to work through that catch-22 if you're going to get funds, opportunistically rather than have to wait. Because you really want money today, at least a small amount, so you can get on with growing the business. It's much more valuable to have some money today than no money for 4 months and then lots of money later. So how do you convince the investor to come in early? And I think one way is if you're raising a very large amount, an investor may think that you are not going to be able to raise that. And if you're raising a very large amount, your slide deck has probably said that you're going to be spending a lot of money to justify it. So the risk has gone up considerably. If you're raising 200K and the investor's giving 20, they don't see it as a big stretch of the imagination that you'll find the rest. You're raising 1 million and they're in for 20, they're much more likely to go, call me when you've got, half of that raised and then I'll come back. So you want to get the investor over the fear that you're not going to be able to raise the rest. But now technically, the other part of your question is with a seed fast, the seed fast says, you give me money now, I'll give you money when I do my next round. And when we launched Seed Fast, I always thought it was a fail if you didn't do the next round and it converted at the long stop date. So the long stop date's there to protect the investor. It says, if you don't do a funding round in 6 months, typically, I'm going to give you shares regardless. And then what I saw is founders going, actually, I've got no real intention of doing a funding round ever. I'm just going to keep raising the seed fast. And when it gets to 6 months, I'm going to give them their shares at the agreed long stop valuation. And although it was to me a fail, I think it's actually just a clever new way of doing things. So really, in your mind, you've now got two ways that you might want to go, and you don't know which it will work out. So you want to raise, let's say, hypothetically, 300K. You start talking to investors and raise with seed fast 20K here, 20K there, and so on. And if it turns out that you actually raise as much as you need, you now want to spend your time back on product development, not talking to investors. So you now kick the can down the road on the funding round. When 6 months arrives, give the investors their shares. If you pick the long stop valuation wisely, you and the investors are both happy. Doesn't matter there was no funding round. On the flip side, if you actually find some larger investors, you might go, all right, I won't give you seed fast. You will be the funding round and I'll convert everyone else. So the nice thing is you've actually got some optionality in how you go, but not doing a funding round is not a fail. You're still going to give the investors their shares in 6 months. Now, by the way, the one thing I haven't spoken about, which is I'm actually in New York right now. I spend half my time in New York and half in London. And one of the things I'm doing is the Delaware flip. So one thing is you all read in TechCrunch the amazing amounts of money in the US and the amazing valuations. And you talk to UK investors and they're a bit meh, oh, if only you could raise from US investors. So, firstly, don't feel shy to reach out to US investors. There's nothing preventing them investing in your UK company. Um, they may well say no, and they may say no for two reasons. One, US investors get a lot of US companies coming their way, and they're all focused on the huge US market. So, in order to attract US investors, you have to show you're addressing the huge US market. The second thing is if you have a Delaware C corporation, you are a lot less friction for those investors compared to what's this English law stuff and so on. So in the same way, we've got SEIS and EIS in the UK. In the US, it's not as good. There's something called QSBS, which is investors investing in a C corporation, a US company. If they keep their stock for 5 years, they pay no federal capital gains tax. So US investors, in order to invest, will generally want to see the US market addressed, and they'll often want a US company. So don't feel shy to reach out to US investors. Try to get them to invest in your UK company. But if they insist on a Delaware company, I'm here to productize and make it way easier to create that Delaware company. And the good news is if you've raised SEIs before, those investors can keep it even if you do the Delaware flip, and you can go on to raise from UK investors in your Delaware company offering SEIS and EIS, something that most people don't know. So, obviously there's cost overhead and admin overhead for having a US entity, probably assume a few $1,000s a year in extra overheads on legal and tax and compliance. And the US, as you quickly discover, isn't one country, it's 50 states. Almost all startups are in Delaware, so that makes it simpler. But if that is of interest, drop me a note. And my suggestion generally is it's an interesting thing to keep in mind, but only if you come across a US investor who insists on a Delaware company as a condition for investing, and it's a chunky investment amount, then it might be worth doing. So unless you plan to get on a plane and move to the US yourself, in which case you may do it speculatively. All right, let me see any other questions. Oh, right. So Anne-Marie says, what about A16Z move from Delaware to Nevada? It's interesting. I'm not an expert on Delaware versus other states. So every time I talk to an investor or law firm here, I ask this question, what about this noise on Twitter about, other states? And literally 100% of the time, they tell me, don't waste your time on anything other than Delaware, because lawyers all know Delaware law, investors all know Delaware law. No one wants to waste their time on a Texas thing because they don't know it. And Delaware case law is very well established, but in these other states, it's not. So, if you're Musk and you've got a shareholder revolt and so on, maybe, or activists, maybe it's something for you. But for an early stage startup, you've got one mission in life, get money from your next investors. And if your next investors see, if you're in the US, that you've got a Delaware company, there's zero friction. And if you tell them you've got a Texas company, they don't know where to start. I mean, you can't, when I talk to our US partner law firms, and I say, I've got a customer that's a Texas company, they make the sign of the cross like in True Blood, because they don't know Texas law, and then you have to go shopping around. So it'll be interesting to see if that changes, but right now, don't get seduced by anything that Mr. Musk posts on Twitter. All right. So Lewis says, when's the best time to speak to investors for consumer goods, FMCG? We're pre-launch. Do we speak to them now or wait? So you've asked really the key question, which is, when do you fundraise? And I think the time to fundraise, we see a lot more posts on Twitter and so on about seed strapping or bootstrapping. Bootstrapping is where you fund it. Seed strapping is where you sort of grow organically, you get some revenue and so on. The problem is, unless you're independently wealthy, it costs money to hire developers, and if you're not paying for it, someone else is. So if you're not fundraising, it's costing you thousands of pounds a month from your own pocket, or you're constraining the rate of growth. And so I think the time to fundraise, take other people's money, is the point where the ability to fund it yourself is limiting your rate of growth. And at that point, you're trading time in your life versus equity in your company. So if you are saying if only I had a salesperson or a marketing person or a developer, things would go faster. If I fund it myself and don't give up my day job, another year goes by while I'm vibe coding and doing sales calls. I mean, that's inefficient. So time is money. And I think as soon as you've validated the product and are ready to get customers, I think that's the time to start growing the company fast. And if that means raising money to hire more people, then do so. You don't have to go straight from zero to raising £2 million. That's what your, SEIS round is for. But I mean, at Seedlegals, my co-founder and I were funding it ourselves, put in £1,000 a month, and then two, and then four, and then six. And then you're thinking at some point, my wife's going to notice, we could have spent something, we could have bought a new Ferrari or something in between. And so we really need to get investor money because otherwise I'll be bankrupt. And as my co-founder says, you can't own more than 100% of your own company. So as soon as you've validated it and you've seen that there's potential traction and your ability to fund it is holding things up, that's the time to reach out to investors. And then you quickly realize that angel investors are the way to go. All right. I think that we are on the magic hour to the minute. So thank you. Now, don't feel shy to reach out Anthony Rose on LinkedIn or anthony@seedlegals.com if you've got any questions. And I'm delighted to help. And I think I might drop a note if I get the details to everyone afterwards as well. So I hope this was helpful. Thank you so much. Good to see some known faces and some other faces as well. Thanks for the thumbs up. And I'm delighted, as you can hear, and super enthusiastic always to help on startup journeys and do have some fun with Lovable as well. Okay. Thank you, everyone. And thanks, Nicholas, for arranging.